since I'm always criticizing the World Bank, it's nice to have an occasion to say something good, at least historically good, about the World Bank in terms of the Bretton Woods conference by which the IMF and the World Bank were inaugurated in 1945. At the close of World War II and then the end of the Great Depression, I mean, there was an enormous interest in peace, prosperity, clear up the ravages of war and depression. And so I think this was a marvelous conference. And they set up some institutions to... now, what kind of institutions did they set up? They set up a federation of nations so that the members of the IMF, the members of the World Bank, which are the same, are nation states. Not corporations, not individuals, but nation states. And the World Bank and the IMF are supposed to serve the mutual interests of its members, the nations. And so it's a federated thing. And that, I think, international trade, and you could argue free trade along comparative advantage lines, fits with that to some degree, as long as they traditionally did, restrict capital mobility. Okay, that's one model. That's a model of world community. So it's important to emphasize here that both of these are models of world community. Nobody is against world community. Nobody's in favor of isolationism. But this model of world community says the fundamental unit of policy is the nation. Nations cooperate, nations in their own mutual interests, in a federated way, and that was Bretton Woods. Now, once the Bretton Woods institutions got set up and became functioning, mature bureaucracies, I don't know what happened. The bureaucrats maybe got a little too ambitious, or their ideology changed, or corporate interests, or I don't know what happened. But the idea switched from this model of internationalization, in which relations among nations, it shifted to globalization in the sense of global economic integration, which is different from federation. Federation, you have independent units cooperating. Integration, you merge into one entity. You erase the boundaries, and the clearest statement of this was from the first, or at least one of the early directors of the WTO, Renato Ruggiero, who proudly said, we're no longer writing the rules for international trade among nations. We're writing the constitution of a new global economy. So he says the constitution of a new global economy versus rules of interaction. Rules of interaction is internationalization, Bretton Woods. The new integrated global economy is the vision of the WTO, and total capital mobility, total free trade, and increasingly easy migration, although that's an issue which has been treated somewhat separately. But in terms of the logic, if you're going to have an integrated economy, then you ought to have free migration also, along with free capital mobility, and you have just one big global economy. A world without borders, which sounds good. That's another model of global community. That's a model of global community in which you have repressed the nation state as an intermediate member, to be an intermediate community, to be federated into a larger global community. So now we've got just no intermediation, but just a direct membership in a global community. That's the vision. I'm not a citizen of the U.S., I'm a citizen of the world. That's the idea. Well, I think that vision is very dangerous. Yes, the U.S. should be a good federated citizen of the world, but also there seems to be that we have to respect community where it really exists. historically and in terms of institutions of mutual caring and policy. And that's basically the nation state and smaller units within the nation. The problem then is if you suddenly go free trade, free capital mobility, you weaken the possibility of the nation to carry out policies. And you haven't strengthened really any global governance there. I mean, capital now is mobile, it goes all over. Capital used to be controlled in the public interest to some degree by the nation state. Capital has outgrown the nation state, but there's no global governance to control capital in the global public interest, and indeed the global public interest is not very well defined in any case. So I think one could say, okay, we've got two alternatives. Either we bring capital back down to the scale of the nation state and then continue with our federated model, or we accept that capital has forever grown beyond the scale of the nation state, and then we have a global government to control capital in the global public interest, and we move in that direction. Logically, I suppose that you can make a case for either one. I feel that that we're better off going with what we've had some experience with, trying to go back down into the nation state. I mean, one can debate that all the time, and I confess that I might have been much more of a globalist in my inclinations before I spent 6 years with the World Bank. That made me very leery of the possibility of any kind of global collaboration.